Welcome to my class, and in this I'm going to talk about the movement that takes place in the demand curve. There are two types of movements. One movement is on the demand curve itself, and the other is the movement of the demand curve. So these are the two movements we are going to study today. So one is what? See, the preposition on and off. Movement on the demand curve, on the same demand curve, and movement of the demand curve. That means a new demand curve. So that's what we are going to do. Just have a look. It's very interesting and it's a very important concept that we are going to do. So when we are talking about movement along the demand curve, it refers to all such situations when change in demand is related to change in own price of the commodity. And sometimes it's referred to as change in quantity demanded. Whereas when we are talking movement of the demand curve, that shows a shift in the demand curve. And all such situations when change in demand is related to factors other than own price of the commodity. And it is simply referred to as change in demand. Now, in the movement on the demand curve, along the demand curve, other determinants of demand, remember what we did? Like prices of other goods, that is substitute and complementary, then tastes and preferences, T, income, I, and E, expectations. All other determinants of demand other than own price of the commodity are assumed to be constant. So the only thing that changes is the change is due to the change in the own price of the commodity, and all the other determinants remain unchanged. They are the same. When we are talking about movement of the demand curve, in this we see that it's only the own price of the commodity which is assumed to be constant, while any of the other determinants of demand changes. For example, prices of other commodities like substitute and complementary goods, tastes and preferences, I, income, and E, remember O tie we did, and E is expectations. All these change, and because of these changes, there is a shift in the demand curve. It can be a rightward shift, it can be a leftward shift. So diagrammatically, as I've shown you, these things, diagrammatically, it is shown as a downward or upward movement along the same demand curve. So it's a downward movement or an upward movement along the same demand curve. And if you see diagrammatically, it is shown as a forward shift or a backward shift in the demand curve. Now let's talk about expansion and increase in demand. You can see the diagrams here. When you're talking about an expansion, what do you see? It refers to increase in quantity demanded due to decrease in own price of its commodity. So it shows that because of a fall in the price, there has been an expansion in demand. And when you're talking about increase in demand, it refers to increase in quantity demanded even when own price of the commodity is constant. In fact, when there is an increase when the price at the same price, the price of the commodity is constant. So here, in increase in demand, we have assumed that the price remains the same. That means the price doesn't change. So increase in demand leads to a forward shift in the demand curve, or the rightward shift in the demand curve, as you can see. And when you're talking about expansion, sometimes it's also known as extension. So extension of demand leads to downward movement along the demand curve from left to right. Now see the last two diagrams here. And in this, we will talk about contraction of demand. So contraction of demand refers to decrease in quantity demanded due to decrease in own price of the commodity. And here the assumption is that all the other determinants of the demand, what are they? Like for example, prices of other goods of the commodity, that is substitute or complementary goods, tastes and preferences, income, and expectations, all remain unchanged. And contraction of demand leads to upward movement along the demand curve from left to right, as you see it. Now talking about decrease in demand. So what you have, decrease in demand, it shows that the quantity demanded decreases even when the own price of the commodity is constant. Now, decrease in demand is studied on the assumption that own price of the commodity is constant, but the other determinants of demand may change. It can be prices of related goods like substitute goods and complementary goods. It could be the income, it could be tastes and preferences, and it can be expectations. And then decrease in demand leads to a backward shift in the demand curve. As you see, there is a leftward shift. You can see the arrow there. So basically, this is what we have. These are the movements that we did. One movement is on the demand curve, or you can call it along the demand curve, and the other movement is off the demand curve. So those are the two prepositions, remember, on and off. So you can get a question as to what do you mean by quantity demanded, change in quantity demanded. When a question comes like that, then what do you talk about? Due to change in price. Okay, we'll get back in the other class.